We've got population shortages in large parts of the world, up to and including here and in Germany and in China. When the economic structure transforms to match the demographic structure, everything else has to change with it. So in the case of the Chinese, they're no longer the low-cost producer. In the case of the Germans, they're not going to be able to maintain their industrial output. And you break down those systems, and we have no choice but to look in China in a new light. And all of a sudden, Mexico is far more important than it has been.
You've got fairly different situations. The worst population contraction is in Japan.
Not anymore.
No, where is it worse?
The Japanese are still the world's oldest society, age-wise, but they have been able to take baby steps for the last 30 years to slow down the decay, and now Thailand and Germany and Italy and Poland and China and Korea and Taiwan are all aging faster.
During, if you'll accept this is my premise, and argue with me if you have the temerity, my premise is that artificial intelligence will have an effect quite different from the one of the Industrial Revolution. What do you say to that? That in fact we won't have a labor shortage, we're going to have too many people out of work, particularly in the lower tier of the employment structure?
Well, I'd say a couple of things that I have a problem with there. Number one, if China and Germany go the direction I'm expecting, then that's a lot of industrial plant, a lot of manufacturing that creates stuff that is going to go away. And we're going to have to build it ourselves if we still want things, especially in the electronics and computing space. So the proportion of workers in the United States that are in services is going to have to shrink in order to grow these other sectors. Second, the balance of production and consumption is what defines economic health and structure. And even if AI does everything we hope it will do, that's only on the production side of things. You still need consumers. And that means you still need people who are under age 40 to do the consuming.
But those people need incomes. You can't consume. You talk about Mexico. I can take you to parts of Mexico where people are not consuming. Mm-hmm. They're not going to go out and substitute for middle-class Americans buying everything they can get on their credit cards.
The partial solution for that is infrastructure so they can participate in a more industrialized society. We've certainly seen that work very well in the north of the country.
Because we put in factories.
By we, you mean us and the Mexicans together? Yes.
Okay, absolutely. No, it's obviously collaborative. We didn't go there as an imperial power and say we're going to make our cars here, or many things I know that are made in Mexico that people, turbines are made there and all sorts of interesting things. But nonetheless, we're going to have probably, or at least according to my expectations, a surplus of people who do simple work. The entry-level jobs, catering, hotel work, this sort of thing. And farming has already been largely automated.
True.
And in a speech, you said that you couldn't pick fruit, tropical fruit, with machines, but you can with AI and sensors. In fact, they gently take that avocado off and put it in the box.
They are working on that, and it really depends upon what the crop is. So probably, assuming the current pace of technological advance holds, big if, we'll be able to do a lot of apples within the next 5 years, but things like mangoes and avocados and cherries are much
I think mangoes were what you mentioned. Mm-hmm. So explain for our viewers the chip shortage.
All manufacturing processes have multiple steps in order to make it happen, and the final product that comes out of the assembly line is only one step of that process. You have to build things that build the facilities that build the end product. And in the case of the high-end chips, 10 nanometer and smaller, there are 9,000 steps just to get the facility online. And the majority of those steps are 4,500 companies that only produce one product for one customer. And they're spread out around the world with a heavy emphasis on North America and Europe. So if one country, for whatever reason, kind of falls out of that constellation, we lose the ability to attempt to be able to make the chips, because these companies have been specializing on this for decades. It's globalization in physical form, and a lot of them only have a staff of 50 or less, and they're the only people on the planet who know how to do that one thing. So if something happens to, say, Germany, which with its demographics suggests that something's going to happen very hard to Germany, we lose the lenses that are necessary in the lithography. And we will have to rebuild that environment somewhere else with a more stable labor pool and the adequate capital and labor supply. That can't be done in 6 months. That's a 2 to 10 year process. And the more steps that we lose, the longer they're going to be out of whack. So when I look at artificial intelligence, when I look at the iPhone, when I look at satellite communications, when I look at the smart grid or EVs, everyone needs the same quality of chip in order to do these things at scale. But if we lose 80% of the chips, we lose 80% of those applications. And will AI be the one that ultimately rises to the top and we collectively decide as a society this is what we absolutely have to have? Maybe we will. Or maybe it has to be server farms.
Won't it be somewhat entrenched already, the people in immediate danger of transformative effects of AI are words in, words out equal? He said language in, language out, which is affecting lawyers. The horror stories about a lawyer in New York.
We're all broken up about that.
Yeah. No, we're not. Journalists, already we're in powerless shape because of how the internet has destroyed traditional models of publishing. But now we don't know what's true. Not only do we not know whether it was written by a machine, but whether the material that the machine was working with was true. And it seems to me that we're a small industry in verification.
Well, media is a different category, and it's definitely wrapped up in the whole technological discussion. It used to be, if you go back to the 80s and before, is that every newspaper, even relatively small ones, would have multiple offices around the world where you would have copy editors and journalists and writers and the rest.
I was there.
And there were multiple eyes on every piece that was produced, so there were lots of places to do kind of a check to make sure it passed the smell test. But as the technology advanced and we got faxes, and then email, and then attachments, and now algorithms and AI, the number of people that were in use steadily shrank, especially away from the mothership.
Publishing had a huge return on equity. It was one of the most profitable things you could do. And then it collapsed.
Because it digitized.
It collapsed because the advertisers didn't have to pay for the paper and the ink and printing. They could go straight, and they could identify the customer and be much more targeted.
Right, and we went from broadcasting to narrowcasting, and lots of people with lots of eyes looking at every piece to very few people. And as a result, a lot of our reporting just turned into opinion instead of fact.
Peter, what do you think the United States will look like in 10 years?
The industrial plant of the country will be over twice the size it is now. The amount of blue-collar workers will probably be triple the size it is now. And I expect the integration with Mexico to be spectacular, and Mexico will be the fastest growing economy in the world. They're already our #1 partner demographically with immigration and economic interconnections and border crossings, legal border crossings. We are nearing already the stage of a NAFTA 3 to more tightly integrate the North American space. The question in my mind isn't what the United States or North America is going to look like. That's pretty clear to me. It's what's every place else going to look like? Because we're looking at a demographic collapse on a scale we have never seen in human history right now.
But we're also looking at a time when the world population is greater than it has ever been, 10 billion.
Not for much longer.
It does seem to me that maybe we could use some of those people to make up for this deficiency in labor.
In times gone by, the United States has had an outward-looking immigration program, and that has served us very well. It doesn't come for free. There's some cultural quirks that come with that people are nervous about. We've done this before. The problem is that we're going to have to really reach out if we want to do that. So Mexico began the industrialization process 35 years ago, which means the birth rate in the last 35 years has dropped by more than half. So net migration from Mexico to the United States has now been flat to negative for almost 15 years. And the Central Americans are aging faster, just from a little later starting point. And so within 5 years, net migration from Central America will probably flatline as well.